Yeah, I'm highly embarrassed about that now. I had no idea it was him. I just thought it was another couple of Collingwood nuffies.
Hi Bomber fans, welcome to the second edition of the Friday Footy panel. Feels like the calm before the storm. No footy this weekend, and it all gets underway next week. Thursday night, Richmond versus Carlton. But let's be honest, the real blockbuster is on the Saturday night between Essendon and Hawthorn at the MCG. The comeback story begins for the Bombers, hoping for 80,000 fans at that game on the Saturday night. Now, we did say last week, Scotty, that we're going to get some special guests, and we've aimed high, and we've got one of the greats. First up, of course, one of the greatest full forwards ever to play the game, and Scotty's partner in crime for the good part of 15 years, the one and only Matthew Lloyd. Lloydie, welcome.
Thanks, Jules. Scotty, it's good to be here.
Made him look good, Jules.
Mate, look, I was going to mention that. Now, we don't want to embarrass you. Actually, you both came in with your career record, so let's mention it. 540 games combined, 1,397 goals. But, Scotty, if Matty wasn't there and you were playing deep, how many did you finish with?
Jules. Spot on. Who knows? Who knows?
Well,
Who knows?
Dermot Brereton does say that. If he was full forward at Hawthorn, he would have kicked 1,000 goals.
Well,
so Dunstall had it easy, yeah.
So you would have had 1,000?
Oh, at least. Although I wouldn't have been able to kick it to myself.
No, that's
Might have
true.
cost me a couple hundred. No. It was fantastic to play with Lloydie, obviously. And that's what being part of a successful team was all about. I mean, the more players that could play and play well, the better your chance were of having success. And, yeah, we had some good players all over the ground, and it was great to be a part of.
We'll talk about it later with Cale Hooker going forward and a partnership hopefully he'll form with Joe Danaher. But how long does it take for two key forwards to really develop a chemistry? You know what Matty's doing and vice versa.
Yeah, I think it takes a little while, but from you train together so much that it can build really quickly. And we had quite defined roles. I clearly played higher for the majority of my career, Lloydie deeper. Picked up really quickly where he liked to lead, and I think he had an understanding that I'd roll onto my left and generally kick it to space. The fact I'd go long a lot, and why wouldn't you? It became really the laws of probability, wasn't it? If Lloydie's one-on-one, the odds are he's going to mark it if you put it in the general area, so why not do that? And that's what we generally did. It was probably a more simple game back then, wasn't it, in the way that you set up and structured up, and not so many early on in our career players dropping back, so you're able to get more one-on-ones forward of the footy, which was always good.
You look at Harry Taylor at Geelong, what his JLT series has been like, so it's not as simple for some just to go down there, so it's going to be a great challenge for Hooker. He went down for half a season, but it's a different story. Some guys can be great at going for a quarter here or there, or a patch of 4 or 5 weeks. We saw Jake Carlisle tear the game apart for 2 weeks, but then didn't do it again after that. So that's going to be Hooker's big challenge. Can he be a consistent forward across a whole season?
All bias aside, in the modern game, it has to be harder to be a key forward now than a key defender.
Oh, no doubt about that. There's more guys who will be able to make the transition from forward to the back line than obviously back to forward. So, but one thing about Hooker compared to Hurley wants to be a defender, and that's all he wants to be. Hooker just says, okay, bring it on. That's what the club needs from me. I'm ready to take on this challenge. No knock on Hurley, because he that's where he plays his better footy. They're different personalities. And Hooker, he wants to be that key forward this year.
You mentioned Hooker, a big VFL practice match tonight down at Simmons Stadium against the Cats. There's some good names playing for the Bombers. Hooker, Tom Bell-Chambers, Howlett, Hartley, Hocking, Green, Matty D, Aaron Francis. Is it as simple as Cale Hooker gets through tonight, he plays against the Hawks?
I'll be interested in what you think, Scotty, of this, where can they play Danaher, Hooker and James Stewart in the same team, or is it Hooker or James Stewart in round one? You think that if Hooker gets through, he plays in round one, but does Stewart play as well?
I don't think so, no. No, I don't think Stewart's form, whilst it's been okay, if Hooker's available, he's in. And I think what we've seen with the way that their forward line's been composed in the JLT games is they've been able to get goals out of small, medium-sized forwards. So with that, they should have some confidence that they don't have to rely on just their talls, maintain their defensive pressure coming out of the forward line, therefore be comfortable that if it's Danaher and Hooker, then go your mediums and smalls, Fantasia, Tipper, Collier, those types can rest up forward. And when you look at it, you might have that midfielder spend some time up there with a Jobe who can play that sort of that hybrid role where he can lead up, crumb. So I think they've got some options there.
Let's tick off on the final game of the JLT. It was a strange game. A lot of games in the JLT were games of two halves. One team would dominate, then it'd swing around in the second half. That's what happen? Do you take the glass half full approach and look more at the first half or the second half the other day down in Bendigo?
Look, I think as an Essendon supporter, in light of the last few years, you certainly take the glass half full. I think it was a really strong performance. They were dangerous up forward. They were able to be very, very good at the clearances, despite getting beaten in the hit-outs for obvious reasons, with Leuenberger out of action with a hamstring. Certainly we saw in the second half when Dangerfield and Selwood stepped up what they're able to do. I think the one area that they'll just have to be mindful of is just that defensive transition of their midfielders. Probably always an area for them that they need to be mindful of. They've got the see ball, get ball midfielders, which is great. And in saying that, Dangerfield and Selwood are very much in that case. But there is that balance through the midfield, and they need to work on that. But I think there's been some very positive signs so far through the GLT.
Yeah, I found it interesting, Jules, where Geelong have been really critical. I think you were interviewing Tom Hawkins. I was watching the other day, and just says patchy pre-season. I know my brother's director of coaching there have been disappointed with the aspects of their pre-season, whereas the Bombers will come out after a game and say, we're pretty pleased with that. So I think Essendon haven't played a final now, won a final now for 13 or 14 years. So I know Scotty's spot on. There's been so many negatives for 4 years, so you do have to take the positives, and you're relaying a lot to your fans. But there comes a time where you say enough's enough, and we've got to be better than a quarter or a two-quarter side, and that's what Essendon is at the moment, and that's why I haven't got them, as we sit here right now, playing finals football until you see. So even the Gold Coast, I know it's JLT, you kick the first 4 goals, you put the foot down on the Gold Coast, but before you know it, they've kicked the next 5 goals. So that's where I think the Giants have got to. They don't do that anymore. Bulldogs, Sydney are just a ruthless side. So I think that's the next step for this Essendon midfield, that they don't let that happen again.
Is that inexperience? Is that not having a killer instinct? Is that not playing together much? Where does that come from?
I think it can be a little bit of all of those, and also overall depth of the list, isn't it, at that very top end? I mean, when we talk of the Geelong midfield of Dangerfield and Selwood, well, both of those, I think, comfortably, if they were in Essendon's team, would be their best midfield. Yeah, Geelong have 2 of them. So it becomes that class through the midfield. And I think Lloyd is spot on. At this stage, we haven't seen anything from the team over 4 quarters that says, in a comp of 18 where 8 make the finals, that they're going to do that right now. I think they're going to be competitive and win some games. But when you look at it and the talk around Geelong and Hawthorn perhaps missing out on finals, I don't see Essendon being superior to them right now.
I think that's a fair call. We'll get into your expectations for the season a bit later, but just, you said last week, we said, what do you want to see from this last JLT game? And you said everyone get through. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Matthew Leuenberger with a hamstring. And Jaden Laverty cannot take a trick. He's actually damaged the sheet on top of his ankle. Will miss probably the first half of the season having surgery. But just on Leuenberger, I mean, some of these injuries are timing. If you look at the first 3 games he's going to miss, Essendon's not coming up against a Max Gawn or a Todd Goldstein. It's Ben McAvoy, it's Stephen Martin, a similar type player to Sean McKernan, Matthew Cruiser. So do you think McKernan will be able to compete pretty strongly in the first 3 rounds, given he's not coming up against monsters?
No, look, he was excellent, wasn't he, to be honest, on Sunday up at Bendigo. So he did a very good job. His need for the team is to be a threat on offence. So he's able to kick the 3 goals, which is really important to make that ruckman accountable, because if you can break even in hit-outs, that'll be a huge win for Essendon, and then you rely on your ground-level players to do very well at the clearances. And the clearance work was solid on the weekend, considering hit-outs model around -30. So they've got to work towards that and plan. And often you'll hear mid say it's easier to plan when you know you're going to get beaten in the ruck rather than have been unsure.
Lord, what about Sean McKernan? He's a fascinating player because his best is really good, and then he just goes missing in games, or he starts giving away some silly free kicks. Why a player of that much talent hasn't been able to string it together consistently?
Well, you look at both he and his brother, Corey, and you can see they're both confidence players. And I think that when they're up and going, Corey was nearly the best player in the AFL at one stage, and Sean has played in patches. And I think that he's probably never belonged at times at Essendon and also the Adelaide Crows, whereas this is probably the first time he knows, I'm just going to be the starting ruckman for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And it gives him an opportunity. I think he's undersized at times for certain ruckmen. So we saw one night against Goldstein, I think he gave away 4 or 5 free kicks, and you just saw his confidence just fading away. Whereas I think it's a good point that you make that McAvoy's a big man, but he's not the player Goldstein is. So I think that he'll hold his own, and it just takes sometimes an injury like this for someone to really make their mark on the AFL, and hopefully that's his time now.
Just one of the burning questions this week. There's been a bit of talk about Essendon fading out so far in their JLT games, and I guess linking that to a host of players coming back. The numbers actually aren't that bad. They only lost the second half to Collingwood by a couple of goals. They actually won the second half against the Suns by 5 points, and obviously the weekend was a 10-goal turnaround in the second half. But is that a concern earlier in the season with so many players coming back that they might fade in games, say the first 5 or 6 weeks?
Look, I think if we look at the JLT in isolation, Jules, the first one, I think they took their starting midfield off in the last quarter, and basically they got smacked out of the centre of the ground, and Collingwood scored on the back of that. And then on the weekend, I almost looking at that thought it was more about Geelong than Essendon, that they went through the motions in the first half and then really stepped it up. But it is a concern if it continues. And I think you'll get a better indication, obviously, early in the season of how that... And I think the question is, or the answer is, we're not sure. We just don't know. It'll come down, when you look at it, how many of them are playing in the team, if you want to draw that parallel. But also, it might be just that the team's taking a while to gel together.
I don't think they even know, Jules, the players. I went and watched training about a week ago and had a couple of players come up to me and say, how do you think we're going to go this year? I could see that they haven't, because it's just so unique a situation where you've had 12 or 13 of your star players come back in. So, I did make that point. I think there's stars everywhere. I think when you play your best, you can match it with anybody. But it's those things we've just been touching on. Are you willing as a side to defend for your life when you need to? I think sometimes Essendon at this stage has been like helter-skelter. There's times where you need to take the pace off the game, and that's their big challenge.
How'd you go in 07? You obviously missed 06 with an injury. I know these guys aren't missing from injury, but they missed 12 months of footy. How did you find your early games back? Getting through?
My second half of the season was much better than the first. So, it did. I felt like I lost a year through footy and then took me another half. So it's probably like a player coming off a knee reconstruction in a sense. It took me 18 months to get myself going again. But so I think that... I think they'll be fine though. I don't think it's anything like coming back from a hamstring off the bone or a knee reconstruction.
And we have spoken about that. They have done a lot of training in that season where Lloydie with his hamstring or someone with a knee, they spend a lot of time not running. So not doing what they're required to do when they play. These boys have been able to get a lot of volume into their bodies.
Now, I know you want to ask Lloydie about Joe Danaher and his kicking, but just to kickstart that conversation, what did you think last year, late in the year, when he was doing basically snaps from straight in front? We saw a right foot snap on the weekend. Where do you think he's at with his kicking at the moment?
Last year I was disappointed because I suppose my whole focus with Joe was having so much consistency and so much doing the same thing over and over and over again, that you've got a fullback position. And my criticism was, well, what's your fullback position? Because it's a drop punt here, it's a right foot snap, it's a left foot snap. So when I improved my kicking, I could tell myself why I missed each time, and it was just an adjustment I need to make. But if you're chopping and changing all the time, what's your fullback position? But then I'm probably changing my mindset a little bit because I went and watched them train, and a bit of a worry is he was practicing all snaps and I didn't see any drop punts going on. So I'm down the Tony Lockett school. If you can kick 8 out of 10 from in front, the snaps are a bonus because they're often the tougher ones that you're not expected to kick. So Joe's big thing is, can he nail the ones he should kick? And the snaps are the cream on top. So that's what I want to see. But nowadays, I've had to change my thinking because they're doing it differently to the way I left 7 years. We left 7 years ago, and this is so foreign to us. But the proof will be in the pudding. It'll look bad if he goes on his right and he shanks it somewhere, but it might improve. He might be more an accurate kick this way.
Why do you think generally they're all going that way? Because there's nothing to suggest at this point in time that they're becoming more accurate.
Yeah, it's obviously they're opening up the angles, but it's interesting that just so many guys seem to have lost their nerve in regards to just feeling like they can kick a drop punt. I think it's more about opening the angles up, and they feel that's an easier kick to make than a set shot, which is it doesn't sit comfortably with me, but the times have changed.
It's a good question. Is it an easier shot, or is there less pressure on the snap to kick the goal? Therefore, like you said, you're not really carrying the burden of I should kick this rather than I hope I kick this. I don't know whether it's a bit of a mindset because I would have thought, and I know the answer to this question. I was going to ask Lloydie, did you feel that you were naturally a great kick or worked extremely hard on it? Well, I would have said for you the latter. And it was that repetition of the same skill that allowed you to become that. I'm not sure whether they're able to spend the time to achieve the repetition required to become an expert at goal kicking and it's often talked about sports science. Now I know that Lloydie several times, and I still say this to players, it's your career. If you need to kick 100 kicks a week and risk hurting your quad in order to be a great kick for goal, do it.
Yep.
Because if you kick 1 goal 4, it's not the sports science or someone that said only have 20 kicks that's copping the heat. You are. And you've got to take that responsibility yourself.
When you worked with Joe, did you get the volume of work you wanted into him?
They were brilliant, yeah. So Crowe, the fitness coach there, was just like they realised how important it was for him. So we started off really well. Then there was a period for a month where he kicked 1 goal 8, and they actually said to me, "Don't even worry about his general training. Just go, and when you've had enough." So we'd do 30 or 40 minutes, and he might train with the team for 20 minutes. So. Anyway, it's obviously in the last few years he's had a change of mindset and philosophy on the way he wants to do things. That's definitely the way. I wouldn't coach that way, but that's the way he's decided to go down. So it's going to be fascinating to see because he's going to have so many shots this year. He's a star. It's just now, can he go from being a good player to a great player by improving his kicking?
There's so much focus on it, like there was with Travis Cloke and Jesse Hogan last year, but Joe seems to play with a smile on his face. Does it actually worry him, or the fact his personality is like that? It's probably a good thing because a lot of people are talking about it, but from the outside it doesn't seem to get to him that much. Yeah,
it gets to everyone. I think when you're just... I was times the way I shied away from the ball. I know, Joey, you're right, he plays with that smile on his face, but it's about the confidence from your teammates wanting to kick the ball to someone, whether they're kicking them or they're not kicking them. He was the type of guy when I worked with him, that giving everything away, he's like, "No, I'm fine," but you wanted him to say, "No, I'm not fine," because you want to actually get down to what are you actually thinking about when you're having a shot for goal, because it's a much mental than physical, the goal kicking. So, but one thing he does do was he always wanted the ball in his hands, even if he had missed. So it's a pretty good start. Yeah.
You said he's a star. If his kicking's pretty good this year, say around the league average, which is high 60s, what should he be kicking, do you think?
In terms of goals, I think that he kicked late 40s.
Yeah, he had 75 shots a goal, plus ones on the full last year.
So he might have kicked around 43, I think, last year, up from high 30s. So I think 50 to 60 goals would be a great season from him.
Purely will come down to his goal kicking accuracy. He'll have 100 shots for goal.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's whether he kicks 65-35 or 55-45, 55-45.